Harris, a well-known dentist, killed her husband, an orthodontist, in a hotel parking lot after confronting him and his mistress over their affair. It was caught on camera by private investigators hired by Harris. Her teenage stepdaughter was in the car at the time of the killing, and the case became infamous around the world.
In the shadowy parking lot of the Nassau Bay Hilton Hotel, a silver Mercedes-Benz suddenly surged forward, its engine growling with intent. Behind the wheel, Clara Harris's grip tightened, her thoughts fueled by betrayal and fury. Her target was clear, her husband, David, and his lover, Gail Bridges. In a moment of irreversible decision, Clara struck, running over David again and again, ensuring he would never rise again. What could push a person to such deadly extremes? How did a once respected dentist and mother become the central figure in one of the most shocking slaying cases of our time? But before we dive deeper into the mystery, I'd like to ask for a small favor. The statistics show that more than 70% of you watching aren't subscribed to the channel yet. If you're enjoying these deep dives into true crime and want to stay updated on future cases, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and ensures you don't miss out on any new videos. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the case. Clara Suarez was born and raised in Colombia, where she developed an early passion for helping others, which eventually led her to pursue a career in dentistry. Her ambition drove her to move to the United States, a land she viewed as full of opportunities where she could fulfill her dreams. Clara's determination and work ethic paid off as she successfully earned her degree in dentistry. Settling in Friendswood, Texas, Clara quickly established herself as a skilled and compassionate dentist, building a thriving practice that became well respected within the community. Her hard work didn't go unnoticed, and her practice became a beacon of success. Friendswood, known for its close-knit community and suburban charm, was an ideal place for Clara to plant her roots. It was during this flourishing period of her life that she met David Harris, an orthodontist whose practice was just as successful as hers. David was charismatic, well-liked, and shared Clara's passion for the medical field. Their professional lives complemented each other perfectly, and it wasn't long before their relationship turned romantic. The couple's wedding in 1992 was a significant event, marking the union of two accomplished professionals who were seen as a power couple in their social circles. They blended their lives both personally and professionally, often working together and supporting each other's careers. Their marriage seemed idyllic, a true partnership that others admired. With their combined incomes, Clara and David were able to afford a beautiful home in an affluent neighborhood, a symbol of the success they had worked so hard to achieve. Soon after their marriage, Clara and David were blessed with twin sons, who became the center of their world. Clara, in particular, was devoted to her children, pouring her energy into ensuring they had a nurturing and supportive environment. She also welcomed Lindsay, David's daughter from a previous marriage, into the family, striving to create a harmonious and loving home. To the outside world, the Harris family appeared to have everything: a successful marriage, a beautiful family, and financial security. They embodied the American dream, living in a comfortable, upscale community and enjoying the fruits of their hard work. However, beneath this picture-perfect exterior, strains began to develop. The demands of running two successful practices left David with little time for his family, and he began to grow distant. His frequent absences, which he attributed to work obligations, became a source of tension between him and Clara. Clara, who had always been attentive and dedicated to maintaining their relationship, began to notice the subtle changes in David's behavior, his late nights, his distracted demeanor, and his decreasing interest in family life. Despite her suspicions, Clara was determined to keep her marriage intact. She was deeply committed to the life they had built together and refused to acknowledge the possibility that something might be wrong. She continued to present a facade of happiness to the world, ignoring the growing cracks in their relationship. But as time passed, the emotional distance between them became more apparent, and Clara's unease grew. In 2001, Clara's worst fears were realized when she discovered that David was having an affair with Gail Bridges, a receptionist at his orthodontic practice. The affair, which had started as a casual fling, quickly escalated into a serious relationship. David and Gail began spending increasing amounts of time together, meeting secretly and even spending weekends and holidays together, all while David lied to Clara about his whereabouts. Clara, desperate to know the truth, hired a private investigator to follow David and gather evidence of his infidelity. The investigator's findings were devastating. David was not only unfaithful, but he was deeply involved with Gail, treating her as more than just a mistress. He had become emotionally attached to her, and their affair had become a central part of his life. This revelation shattered Clara. The life she had worked so hard to build was crumbling before her eyes, and the man she had loved and trusted had betrayed her in the most painful way possible. Feeling humiliated and heartbroken, Clara confronted David about the affair. At first, David denied everything, trying to downplay the relationship. But as Clara presented him with the evidence collected by the investigator, he could no longer lie. He admitted to the affair, but his confession did little to ease Clara's pain. She was desperate to save her marriage and pleaded with David to end the relationship with Gail and return to their family. David agreed, but his promises were empty. He continued to see Gail, further deepening Clara's sense of betrayal and despair. As the affair continued, Clara became increasingly obsessed with the idea of confronting Gail and reclaiming her husband. Despite David's assurances that the affair was over, Clara's instincts told her otherwise. She became fixated on Gail, viewing her as the obstacle standing between her and the life she had once enjoyed. Clara's need for control and her overwhelming desire to hold on to the life she had built led her down a path of desperation. Her emotions, once rooted in love and commitment, turned into a dangerous mix of anger, jealousy, and fear, ultimately setting the stage for the tragic events that would follow. On July 24, 2002, the tipping point came when the private investigator Clara had hired to track David's movements called her with a shocking news. David and Gail were at the Nassau Bay Hilton Hotel, a location they had turned into their clandestine meeting spot. This was the confirmation Clara had dreaded, yet expected. Her worst fears were not only realized, but vividly playing out just a few miles away. Overcome with a mix of rage, desperation, and a deep sense of betrayal, Clara made a fateful decision. She grabbed the keys to her silver Mercedes-Benz, her mind racing with thoughts of confronting the woman who had stolen her husband. In a moment of tragic irony, she took her stepdaughter, Lindsay, along for the ride. Lindsay, who was just 16 years old, had been caught in the crossfire of her family's unraveling. She was close to her father, and the events of that night would leave her emotionally scarred for life. As Clara drove to the Hilton, her emotions were at a boiling point. The anger that had been simmering for months was now threatening to explode. The closer she got to the hotel, the more her thoughts were consumed by the need to confront David and Gail, to make them face the pain they had caused her. The drive, which likely felt like an eternity, was a turning point, a journey from which there would be no return. When Clara arrived at the Hilton, she marched into the lobby with a single-minded determination. Her eyes quickly locked onto David and Gail, who were laughing and enjoying each other's company as if they hadn't a care in the world. The sight was too much for Clara to bear. In an instant her anger took over, and she lunged at Gail, grabbing her hair and shouting accusations. The confrontation was loud and chaotic, with hotel staff and guests looking on in shock and disbelief. David, caught off guard, tried to intervene, but the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Security personnel rushed in to break up the fight, and Gail, visibly shaken, retreated to the safety of the elevator with David, But Clara's fury was far from spent. As she stormed out of the hotel, her mind was consumed with thoughts of revenge. The humiliation she had just experienced in the lobby only added fuel to the fire. Her emotions were no longer under her control. They were driving her toward a tragic and irreversible decision. Back in the car, Clara saw David and Gail in the parking lot, walking toward David's vehicle. In that split second, all the anger, pain, and betrayal boiled over. Clara floored the gas pedal, her only thought being to make David pay for what he had done. The car accelerated rapidly, and before anyone could react, David was struck by the vehicle. He was thrown to the ground, but Clara wasn't finished. Blinded by rage, she circled back and ran over his body multiple times, ensuring that he would not survive the attack. The entire incident was captured on video by the private investigator, who had been documenting David's activities as part of Clara's efforts to catch him in the act. The footage would later become crucial evidence in the case against Clara, showing in graphic detail the lengths to which she had gone in her quest for vengeance. Inside the car, Lindsay witnessed the entire horrific scene unfold. The trauma of seeing her father die in such a violent and deliberate manner would haunt her for the rest of her life. The emotional scars left by that night would never fully heal, leaving her with a burden that no child should have to bear. What transpired after the incident was chaotic. Hotel guests and staff rushed to the scene, and someone quickly called 911. Clara, now in shock, stood by as the reality of what she had done began to sink in. David Harris was pronounced dead at the scene, his body mangled from the repeated impacts of the car. Clara, who had moments earlier been consumed by rage, now found herself grappling with the consequences of her actions. She was arrested on the spot and charged with taking a life in first degree. This shocking act of violence marked the tragic end of what had once been a picture-perfect marriage. The incident at the Hilton Hotel was not just a crime. It was the culmination of months of emotional turmoil, betrayal, and despair. Clara Harris, once a respected dentist and loving mother, was now at the center of a serious trial. The legal battle began in January 2003, capturing the public's attention due to the sensational nature of the crime. A scorned wife using her luxury car as a weapon to unalive her cheating husband. The courtroom was packed with spectators, journalists, and legal experts, all eager to witness the unfolding of this tragic and dramatic case. From the outset, the prosecution built its case around the damning video footage captured by the private investigator, which showed Clara running over her husband David multiple times with her Mercedes-Benz. This footage was played repeatedly in the courtroom, each time eliciting gasps from the audience and reinforcing the prosecution's argument that Clara's actions were not just impulsive, but deliberate and premeditated. The prosecutor emphasized that Clara had not only tracked her husband's movements with the help of a private investigator, but had driven to the hotel with the full intention of catching him in the act with Gail Bridges. They argued that her actions were driven by an intense desire for revenge, making the case for first-degree slaying. The defense, however, painted a vastly different picture of Clara. They portrayed her as a loving wife and mother who had been pushed to her breaking point by the emotional torment of her husband's betrayal. Clara's attorneys argued that on the night of the incident, she had acted in a sudden passion, a term in Texas law that can reduce a slaying charge to manslaughter if the crime is committed in the heat of the moment without premeditation. They claimed that Clara had not planned to take David's life. Instead, she was overwhelmed by the pain and humiliation of discovering her husband's ongoing affair, leading to a momentary lapse in judgment. The defense also focused on Clara's character, calling numerous witnesses to testify about her kindness, generosity, and dedication to her family. Friends, relatives, and colleagues described Clara as a compassionate person who had always put her family first. They recounted stories of her selflessness, painting a picture of a woman who had been utterly devastated by her husband's infidelity. the defense hoped that by humanizing Clara, they could convince the jury that her actions, while tragic, were not those of a cold-blooded assailant. One of the most emotionally charged moments of the trial came when Lindsay Harris, David's daughter from his first marriage, took the stand. Lindsay, who had been in the car with Clara on the night of the incident, provided a first-hand account of the events leading up to her father's death. Her testimony was heartbreaking and pivotal, as she described in detail how Clara had circled back in the parking lot to ensure that David was dead. Lindsay's words added a layer of tragedy to the case, highlighting the deep emotional turmoil that Clara had been experiencing, but also underscoring the brutality of her actions. The trial was a battle of narratives, one side presenting Clara as a vengeful wife who had coldly plotted her husband's demise, and the other as a heartbroken woman who had acted impulsively in a moment of unbearable pain. The jury was left to sift through these conflicting stories, weighing the evidence and the emotional testimony presented by both sides. After several hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict on February 14, 2003. Clara Harris was found guilty of taking a life, but the jury showed some leniency in their sentencing. Acknowledging the emotional circumstances that led to the crime, they sentenced her to 20 years in prison, the minimum for a slaying conviction in Texas. Additionally, Clara was ordered to pay a $10,000 fine, a relatively small amount considering the gravity of the crime. The sentence was a reflection of the jury's belief that while Clara's actions were undeniably criminal, they were also the result of an extraordinary emotional breakdown. The trial marked the end of a tragic saga, leaving behind a shattered family and a story that would be remembered as one of the most dramatic and heartbreaking cases of its time. Clara's conviction brought some closure to the case, but it also raised questions about the role of emotion in violent crimes, the pressures of maintaining the appearance of a perfect life, and the devastating consequences of betrayal. Following her conviction, Clara Harris was sent to the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas, a facility known for housing some of the state's most high-profile female inmates. Once there, Clara's focus shifted from the intense scrutiny of her trial to the quieter, more introspective life behind bars. She quickly adapted to the regimented prison routine, deliberately avoiding any further attention and choosing instead to concentrate on her work assignments and personal development. Despite the high-profile nature of her crime, Clara managed to maintain a low profile, dedicating herself to self-improvement and rehabilitation. Clara's behavior during her incarceration was described as exemplary. She engaged in various rehabilitation programs, not just as a participant, but also as a leader and mentor to other inmates. Her involvement in these programs reflected her desire to contribute positively within the prison community, and she earned respect from both fellow inmates and prison staff. Clara took on leadership roles, guiding other inmates through educational and self-help courses, which highlighted her commitment to personal growth and her willingness to help others do the same. These efforts were instrumental in her eventual eligibility for parole. Clara's transformation from a notorious figure in a sensational crime to a model prisoner did not go unnoticed by the parole board. Her participation in rehabilitation programs, coupled with her good behavior, strengthened her case for early release. In November 2017, after serving 15 years of her 20-year sentence, Clara was granted parole. The decision to release her early was met with mixed reactions from the public. Some viewed her release as a justified reward for her good behavior and rehabilitation efforts, believing that she had paid her debt to society and deserved the opportunity to rebuild her life. Others, however, felt that the gravity of her crime warranted a longer sentence and were concerned about her reintegration into society. Upon her release in 2018, Clara Harris was determined to distance herself from the notoriety that had surrounded her for so long. She moved away from Houston, the city where the crime had taken place, seeking to live a life of relative obscurity. Clara's primary focus was on reconnecting with her twin sons, who had been raised by relatives during her incarceration. Re-establishing her relationship with them was a top priority, as she sought to make up for the years she had lost. Since her release, Clara has largely avoided the public eye. Unlike many others who have been at the center of high-profile cases, she chose not to engage with the media or make public statements about her past. The once intense media attention that had surrounded her case gradually faded, allowing Clara to live out her days away from the scrutiny that had once been so pervasive. Little is known about her current whereabouts or activities, as she has made a concerted effort to keep her life private. Her decision to remain out of the spotlight reflects a desire to move on from the past and to quietly rebuild her life in the shadows of her former notoriety. However, the aftermath of David Harris's death left deep, lasting wounds on the Harris family, particularly on their children. Clara and David's twin sons, who were just 4 years old at the time of the slaying, were thrust into a world of turmoil and uncertainty. With their father dead and their mother incarcerated, the boys were left without the two most important figures in their lives during their crucial formative years. Their sense of security was shattered as they were placed in the care of extended family members, separated from the comforting presence of their mother. Growing up without their parents, the twins had to navigate the complexities of childhood and adolescence while carrying the burden of their family's tragic history. The absence of their father meant they missed out on the guidance and support he could have provided, while their mother's incarceration deprived them of her nurturing and love. The emotional scars from this period have undoubtedly shaped their lives, influencing their development in ways that may never fully be understood by those outside their immediate circle. Despite the challenges, the twins have remained largely out of the public eye, their privacy fiercely protected by the family members who took them in. Lindsay Harris, David's daughter from a previous marriage, was also deeply affected by the events of that night. As a teenager, she was old enough to fully grasp the horror of what had happened, and the trauma of witnessing her father's death at the hands of a woman she had once considered a mother figure left her emotionally scarred. Lindsay's relationship with Clara had always been complex, marked by the typical tensions between a stepmother and stepdaughter, but the events of July 24, 2002, transformed that relationship into something much darker. During the trial, Lindsay's testimony was a pivotal moment, as she recounted the harrowing details of the night her father was slain. Her words underscored the emotional devastation that Clara's actions had caused, not just for Lindsay, but for the entire family. The Harris family, once seemingly perfect, was left in shambles. Relationships were strained, and the bonds that had held them together were tested to their limits. Clara's extended family, particularly her parents and siblings, were also deeply affected by the tragedy. They remained supportive of Clara throughout her trial and incarceration, standing by her even as the media scrutiny intensified. The trial was a harrowing experience for them, as they watched their loved one become the central figure in a case that captured national attention. Their unity was tested, but they continued to hope for leniency and prayed for Clara's eventual release, believing in her capacity for rehabilitation. On the other side, David's family struggled with their own grief and anger. The loss of a son and brother in such a violent and public manner was a devastating blow, compounded by the constant media coverage that made it difficult to grieve privately. The public nature of the case meant that their pain was on display for all to see, and the division between Clara's supporters and David's family became more pronounced as the trial progressed. The trial and its aftermath left both families grappling with the fallout, as they tried to make sense of the senseless and find a way to move forward. In the years following Clara's conviction, both families attempted to rebuild their lives. Clara's release from prison in 2018 brought mixed emotions. For some, it was a moment of relief, a chance to reunite with her and begin the process of healing. For others, it was a painful reminder of the crime that had torn their family apart. with lingering feelings that justice had not fully been served. As we close this chapter, it's worth considering the lasting impact of Clara's actions on those who survived. Can time truly heal such deep scars? Or do the echoes of that night continue to haunt those left behind? How should justice weigh the emotional turmoil behind such crimes? Share your thoughts below. What do you think drove Clara to her breaking point? And how do you believe her actions should be judged? If you found this story compelling, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for more in-depth explorations of the most complex and captivating true crime cases. Stay tuned, because there's always more to uncover.